Alright, we're gonna have a intro to Substance Painter. So to start us off, before we get into the UI, we're gonna start a new project here, right? So file new, right? And then we need to select our mesh or 3D object to be able to actually have something to work with. In our case, I'm going to start with the block that we're going to be using for our first exercise. Now, I'm going to be using the project template of Unreal Standard, right? Now, the other one you could use is the PVR Metallic Roughness with Alpha Blend, depending on what you're working on. In our case, since we're sending our assets to be displayed in Unreal, we'll start with the Unreal assets. We can choose the document resolution size. It doesn't really matter at this point in time, but because we can set it afterwards before we export or while we're working, right? So I'm just going to leave it as default. DirectX, because we're sending it to, again, Unreal, right? You could do OpenGL if you're doing like Unity or other, depending on, you would find out what would be the main thing for whatever render engine you're using, right? Other things that I'm not sure if default, you want to make sure you turn off auto unwrap, right? It will change the UV maps of your 3D model. So we're going to hit the create. And then you can see on the left and right side here, and I'm going to use the mouse wheel to zoom out here, right? So I scrolled out. Right, so you've got the 3D view on the left side, the 2D view on the right side, right? Now, we have along the left hand side here now, we can actually see all the tools light up here. So this is our toolbar, right? So this has the paint tool. So it's a paintbrush. So if I hold control and drag left, right, I can drag that out really quickly. You can kind of see me here. Oh, apparently I lost my size, right? You can see I'm painting there, right? And we're on a default paint layer, right? And then we have two. So hotkey 1 is the paintbrush, 2 is the eraser, right? So again, holding down control, dragging right on the mouse while holding down the right mouse button will increase your size, except for I didn't let go before. Come on. There we go. There we are. Right? So I'm just going to erase that. Then 2 would be, or 3 is the projection, which we'll get into it later. Then we have 4, which is the polygon fill, which we'll get into when we get into masking. Then we have smudge. You've got clone, and then like a picker for picking materials or colors, right? Then we have the access to the online 3D asset store, which depends on, I'm not sure if the student licensing gives you free downloads with it or not, but you can always check it out. And then if you need to update any of your old Substance files, you would open this up and then update all the different like smart materials and things like that that get updated as Adobe updates things. Next up, we have is the asset browser. Now, I'm going to get rid of the Substance 3D assets. It appears over here actually, which is the dock toolbar, right? You can see we can open them up here. Other things that aren't already docked out here, they can be free floating windows and things like that when we need them. But for right now, we're just going to leave those over there. I'm going to left click and drag my asset bar down here. That way I can see all the different sections, things like that. Now, to kind of show you guys over here, right, we've got different filters, right? So first up, we have the default materials part of Substance. We have smart materials, which is some more stuff that we can play around with and get into as we go through the program, right? Then we have smart masks, which we'll get into when we get into masking. Then we have your filters. Then we have brushes. So these are the different brushes. You can right click on anything at any time and add them as favorites right here, right? Which I'll get into in a bit. Then we have the these are your alphas, right? So black and white images. Some of them have procedural settings and things like that we'll look at when we get into them. Then we have your textures. So these are just, again, procedural stuff created inside of actually Substance Designer that give you parameters that allow you to change different things. Then we have environments. This would be for the lighting. So let's get into the viewport while we're actually looking at the lighting section here, right? So to be able to move around, you use your Alt key in all three of your mouse buttons, right? So Alt and left mouse allows you to orbit or rotate the 2D view, depending which one you're in. Alt middle mouse, the mouse wheel as a button allows you to pan any of them, right? And then you can also use Alt and Shift when you're using like the left click to snap them in 90 degrees or vertical and things like that. Now, Alt right click is zoom in and out, but you can also use the mouse wheel to scroll in and out as well. F allows you to focus. Right. So now that we've got that, we're also going to look at currently we've got some light here, right? So if I hold Shift, you can see that hold Shift and drag my Shift and my right mouse button down. I can drag it left and right. What it's doing here is if I open up the environment settings, display settings here, you can see that we get a little bit of environment settings here, right? Now this panorama are these things here, right? So they're HDRIs, right? So if I were to turn up the opacity really quickly, we can turn up the opacity, and then the blur is 35, but I'll turn it down, right? Zoom in out, and then if I hold Alt and then pan around, you can see the panorama in the background, right? Now, if I hold Shift and then again right click, you can see I'm rotating the environment. So I'm going to put this back to 35, and then I'm going to turn the opacity back down and close the environment settings. Another cool thing to also pay attention to is the tone mapping. It's the way things are lit or rendered, right? Now Unreal uses ACES, right? So that it's good that it's already turned on. We used to have to change it from linear with a lookup color loot, which is actually right here for the color profile. But now you don't need to. It automatically happens when you set it to the Unreal profile. Now, let's see here. So we got basic controls in that. So a little about texel density in that first in our UVs here, right? Since obviously the better you fill your UVs, the more pixels you'll get per the UV shell, right? So we'll hop over here to Maya really quickly, since again the book that we're learning from as well also goes through into Maya. But as our idea here, right, I am going to go to UV mode for our TV that we'll eventually be demoing. Right now, texel density is pixels per unit, but it's also based off of the size of your shell, right? So if I actually open up the transform section of the UV editor here, you can see we can actually, if I didn't have that in the way, see here, can I just open this? There we go. That's better. So you can see here we have the texel density per unit. Now, Unreal uses centimeters. Maya's default is centimeters unless you change it. But ultimately, we would pick the map size, right? So whatever texture size you want, right? I'm using 1020 standard 1K map, right? If I were to grab one of these and hit the word get, right, we're gonna get 29 pixels per unit, right? Now, if I scaled that up and use the word get again, you'll see that it goes up, right? Well, I want to grab this one again and then reset that back, right? Because it also ties into making sure that everything has the same checkerboards as well, right? So that way everything will have similar texel density across all assets when you're creating things. Now, I'm going to turn off the UV editing because, well, actually, no. We want to see the UVs currently while I'm doing this, but I'm going to turn off the checkers. Now, you can see with our TV here, it has some different colors here. Now, these are basically, typically you could use the standard surface material, or typically you would use a flat material like a Lambert from, in our case, for Maya, right? Now, basically, these colors represent the different texture sets. If we hop quickly back over to Substance here, or no, let me just grab this guy here, right? So you see here this texture set settings actually up here in the we have in the property panel area, right? So this is the texture set, then we've got all these other properties we'll get into. But as you can see, as I flip through here, right, we've got 3 different sets of UVs here, but they also represent specific parts of a model, right? Now, they can be a single model, right? So currently, if I hop back to Maya really quickly, right? Let's just hop over here, right? You can see that our TV technically is separate pieces. I could still combine these together into one mesh, and Substance Painter won't care whether it's a single mesh or multiple pieces. What matters is the way you pack your UVs, and then if we hop back over here to the actual TV where we can see the actual material, right? So you'll see this has a material that's called, so it's by the name, right? You don't have to color them. You can leave them a default color. What the color is more so going to be used for something we'll get to in a bit, but you'll see this is called TV front casing, right? This one's middle casing, right, for the TV, and then we've got parts, right? And then we've got for the brown down here, it's called parts 2, right? In fact, best example would be this guy, right? So currently, I have in there a version of this that is just, if we look over here, right? So we've got base model, then we have the cap, and then we have the handle, right? Well, this guy here just has, for all its parts, has Lambert. Now, if I were to go to UV mode, didn't mean to minimize that. Try that again, bring that back really quick. There we go. Go to UVs, right? And then see how they're overlapping like that, right? This is exactly how it would be inside of Substance Painter if I left it like this with just a single Lambert on it, right? Where if I grab this, because it has a separate material, right? This is what the UVs would look like in the texture set inside of Substance Painter, right? So then the same goes for this piece, right? And then this piece here, right? All right. So enough of that. Now, quick note, we're going to hop back over, we'll come back here, right? So what I'm going to do is show you guys how to bake our maps, right? So we need to bake some maps to get information so that we can use some of these smart materials or smart masks, right? They need something other than just the mesh itself. So, and I've got another fresh project here with just the little like light bulb thing here, right? We're going to go to either the croissant here, or we could go to texture sets. Now, you'll notice that I've also actually, I'm going to hop back to our cube really first. We're going to eventually do that here. I like to drag my properties panel here. So this will be the prop, oh, no, not there, but right here. Right. This will give me the best options for when I actually hit, you know, so if I hit one to our brush, right, so you see we get all our brush ones. We'll get into that when we get into actually working with it. But then we have the layers. Then we also have the texture settings. This is what we're going to be looking at, what I mean by baking. We're going to bake the respective maps. So you'll see down here, they're currently empty, and then we have bake mesh maps, or you have the croissant here, or F8 on the keyboard. Right? We can also add channels, which we'll get into once I get into a layer. But first, let's bake our maps. Now, I'm going to bake this at 2K. No, I'll bake this cube at 4K. Yeah, I'll bake this cube at 4K, right? I am going to turn off the ID map because we don't need it for this one. We don't have it. It's something I'm going to show you guys with baking for the other one at a lower resolution. Apply diffuse. So think of it this way. All the areas that this doesn't technically cover, right, is blank space. What apply diffuse does is it helps fill in here so that way you don't have that weird black seam at the edge here when you bring it into somewhere for some reason, right? So you want to make, I usually have that checked. So we'll go back in here, we'll check that, right? Now, I don't have a high poly, so baking typically, again, depending on what you're doing, right, you would have a high to low poly workflow or low poly to high workflow, and then you would bake the high poly's information down onto the low poly, right? In our case, we don't have a high poly. We just have a low poly, right, for this one. And then I'm going to add in the sampling, so anti-aliasing, to get a cleaner and crisper bake as well. Max that out. This is where we would hit the file folder here and add in anything for an ID map or a mesh. So a mesh for an ID map, a mesh for a high poly. Then technically you could also, there is eventually also, depending on what type of cage you use, which we'll talk about. No, I don't think if we have a high poly version, but if you did, you'd have mirror and max ranges. But what we're doing is we're basically shooting rays from a certain distance away from the cube, right? And then it goes in, and then it takes in the information of the high poly, right? Now we'll come back to the ID map. I'm just going to hit bake for this guy, right? And while we do that, in fact, let us kind of also go over some of the default textures that you're kind of seeing here, right? So just scrolling down on my notes just so that way I can go over it, right? So first one we did right there that you saw, that was like a bluish, purplish blue, right? It's called a normal map, right? So it simulates surface detail based off of 3 different like channels, red, green, blue, representing like the 3 different axes in 3D, right? So your X, Y, and Z, right? It allows you to make high polys look like their their counterpart, or their low polys look like the high poly counterpart. Sorry, getting tongue-tied there. Next up, we have the world space. World space is used to identify the orientation in the world, right? Used for effects like dust accumulation, directional water, right? So it helps decide which way is the faces of an object facing, right? And then the ID map. This is a stores color regions for masking materials, right? We'll get back to that when I do the second bake. Now, then you have add soft ambient occlusion, which is our next one, right? This map here adds a soft light in crevices, important for realism, right? So as you can kind of see here, right, if I hover over it, right, you can see I get a little bit of shadows where basically probably right around here, if that from where the UVs are set up, right, you can see like the little dark areas there. In fact, since this is done, I can actually come over here, show you. So F1 is current view, F2 is 3D view. Right, so if I come over here, right, I can actually cycle through our maps, right? So if we go normal, right, should look like this since we don't have high poly info, right? Then we go to the AO, right? So you can see that right here we've got some baked in shadows right down here, right? So that's our ambient occlusion, right? Then I'll go back quickly to show you world map. We don't, or world space normals. Very similar to the normal, but you can see right here, depending on which way you're facing, will have different colors. Next up, we have the curvature map. It helps detect edges used for edge wear, scratches, damage, things like that, right? You can kind of see it has the nice line there. That we got going around here, right? Obviously, it'll get whiter the more round the object, more gray the more flat the object, right? Then we have the position, right? So this guy is stored spatial information about the mesh used for procedural effects. Again, another map that you see that got populated down here, right? Then we have the thickness map as well, which is another black and white one, right? So this guy here, right? This thickness map, again, stores thickness values of the geometry, again, used by Substance Painter's effects and material variations. Again, some more parameters of these guys here, right? So the generators and things like that we'll get into. So I'm going to hit M to restore this. Then I don't need to add any extra channels currently for this one. I'm just going to go back to the layers so that we can eventually get back into painting. So now I'm going to go over here to show you baking that ID map, right? So I'm going to come over here, do bake mesh maps. I already baked everything else. So what I'm going to do actually is for all, I'm going to turn off everything, right? So deselect all, right? And then I'm going to turn on the ID map. I'm going to go over here to select files so that way I can select the ID map one that I have over here. Now, ID maps, if I click on it, we can see that it can be based off a material color or vertex painting, which I'm going to do a bit both bakes because I can hop quickly back actually to Maya, right? So this guy here has what's known as vertex painting on it, right? Now it's already displayed. So you can kind of see this here, but I'm going to do the materials first. So you're going to see that these colors don't match up with our actual bake here, right? So if I go with the material, right, and then I make sure I come up here first and apply to all selected textures, you hit OK, and then we bake, right? In fact, you can already see that the two of them are the same, but it's this guy here that's not quite the same. It's coming in. Oh, am I baking it at 4K? Oh, that might be why. 1 second. I'm going to cancel that. Go up to common. I don't want to bake this one there. Let's bake that there. Again, you can always come back and bake it later at higher resolution. So I'm going to bake selected. So you saw there that I didn't mean to bake everything again, but apply. I should have did that. That's okay. Oh, no wonder why apply. I should have did apply to all. Sorry, not specific. I didn't because then I didn't check these, which is why that didn't work. But as you saw, if I go back over here, we go over to the ID map, right? This is teal, right? Well, we don't have teal here, right? Well, I do, but it's hidden because we have vertex painting visible, right? So again, we'll getting to use these when we get into the TV, but just to show you guys, we are going to quickly go back to the bake, and I'm going to swap this to vertex color, and then I'll hit bake again, right? So then I get a couple extra colors in my map there, and apparently I didn't have it. There we go, right? See here, just go over to each of these. See here, click on common settings, apply all these settings there. Apply. Oh, if I did that, that would have been right. Okay, that's my bad. Although you can also at any point turn off like anything up here. So this is bake selected texture versus the current model that you're on, right? So right now I'm on the handle or of that texture set. All right. I'm going to pause the video here for this will be the end of part 1. We'll go into part 2 where we actually start texturing our box here, right? And then we'll get into our cube and get into some of like the smart materials and things like that. And then we'll have part 3 for bringing it to Unreal.